Dillian Whyte is not being magnanimous in his defeat to Tyson Fury. Instead, he is starting to come out with excuses. And this is particularly unfortunate because Dillian, like most of us, was lambasting Deontay Wilder for making excuses following his defeat to Fury. So for Dillian to turn around and do the very things that he was criticizing Deontay Wilder for doing is hypocritical, of course. Dillian Whyte hasn't gone to the extremes of excuse making that Deontay Wilder went to, and hopefully he won't, but he is starting to lean uncomfortably close to it. Now, I made a video several weeks ago following Josh Taylor's controversial points decision win over Jack Catterall. And I explained in that video that in order to reach the top in boxing, to become a world level fighter, you have to have a level of confidence and a level of optimism, which is far beyond that of the average Joe. If you are somebody that is easily discouraged, you're not going to make it in boxing, obviously. So when you have a guy like Josh Taylor who comes out after the Catterall fight and says, it was a really close fight, but I think I nicked it, I wasn't as outraged and disappointed as many other people when Taylor said that, because I understood that this is the mentality you need to reach this level in boxing. You have to see the glass as half full rather than half empty. You have to see a silver lining in every cloud. That's what fuels your determination. That's what keeps your confidence high. That's what allows you to bounce back from defeats and difficult situations. So when a fighter like Josh Taylor is in a fight against Catterall, he's not focusing on all the successes that Catterall had in a particular round. He's thinking about his own successes. If he was focusing on Catterall's successes rather than his own, then he would get discouraged very easily. So he's got a skewed perception of what happened in that Catterall fight. Most top-level fighters have a skewed perception of what happens in their fights because they are insufferable optimists. Now, not all of them verbalize it. Some of them are canny enough, they're savvy enough to actually not come out and say how they really feel about a fight because they're cognizant of how it may affect their public image. So my point in that Taylor video was that a certain degree of delusion, if you want to call it that, is to be expected and, in my view, tolerated when it comes to these top-level fighters. And the insufferable optimism is even more extreme with a guy like Dillian Whyte than it would be with Josh Taylor, because Dillian Whyte isn't as talented as Josh Taylor. Dillian Whyte isn't as talented as Anthony Joshua, Tyson Fury, etc. So he has to compensate for the fact that he's not as talented as those guys by having an even higher degree of insufferable optimism, particularly since he didn't have the kind of amateur background that those other fighters have. So when Dillian Whyte is coming out saying that he thought the fight against Tyson Fury was close and competitive, he didn't feel as though he was being outclassed and he felt like he was still in the fight. When he comes out saying stuff like that, it's reasonable. It's not true, but it's reasonable under the circumstances, because although Tyson Fury won every single round, certainly on my scorecard, I know some people have made a case for Dillian Whyte winning the first, and that's debatable, but for me, Tyson Fury won that round as well. Although Fury won every round, it was a low volume fight. There weren't a lot of punches landed by either man. It wasn't like Dillian Whyte was being pushed back every round and hit with every single punch in the book and beaten up in the way that Deontay Wilder was, for example, in the second Fury fight. It wasn't like that. It was more of a technical fight where both guys were pretty cautious and Tyson Fury was using his natural physical advantages to nullify Whyte's offense and frustrate him. So in a low volume fight like that, I can understand why an insufferable optimist like Dillian Whyte would still think he was in the fight. I don't agree, of course, but it's understandable. It's a level of delusion, if you want to call it that, which I can tolerate. But then you have situations where the delusion is so extreme that you're actually teetering on the brink of psychosis. And that's exactly what we had with Deontay Wilder following his second fight with Tyson Fury. And that, of course, becomes very, very dangerous for the fighter, both mentally and physically. Unfortunately, Dillian Whyte has started to lean in this direction himself. He's not quite there yet, not as extreme as Wilder at this stage, but the signs aren't good because he is now making excuses for the knockout itself. Never mind just thinking that he was in the fight because it was low volume, etc. No, now he's saying that the knockout itself should be called into question. He says that after landing the uppercut, which he admits did buzz him, Tyson Fury then shoved him to the canvas and he hit his head on the canvas and that caused him to be even more hurt. He says that the referee should have given him more time to recover because of that shove, and it was close to the end of the round, etc. He believes he could have continued, and he should have been given that opportunity. This is problematic because Dillian Whyte was completely gone from that uppercut. At that stage, a light breeze could have knocked him over. Paulie Malignaggi, with 20-ounce gloves on, could have knocked him over at that stage. He was completely gone. It kind of reminded me of Lennox Lewis when he knocked out Mike Tyson. If you look at the finishing punch, he hits Tyson with a tremendous right hook, and Tyson's out on his feet. Lewis just gently pushes him, and Tyson collapses. Same thing here with Dillian Whyte. It wasn't like Fury shoved him with all his might. No, it was like a gentle push, and Dillian Whyte fell over. And it's, I guess, a defensive move because Dillian Whyte is a dangerous counterpuncher with the left hook in particular. And so one of the things that fighters often do when they're in there against such a fighter who's dangerous with counters is after they get their shot off, shove the guy so that he's too far away to hit you with a counter, or so that he's off balance so that even if the counter does land, it doesn't have as much power on it. So I think it's kind of a reflexive thing for Tyson Fury to do that, being in there against a counterpuncher like Dillian Whyte. Same case for Lennox Lewis when he fought Mike Tyson. Is it illegal? Yes. But in both cases, it was academic. Mike Tyson was completely done when that right hook landed from Lennox Lewis. So whether he shoved him over or hit him with another punch, it wouldn't have made a difference. In fact, even though it's an illegal move, it's better for Tyson that he was shoved over by Lewis rather than hit with another hellacious punch. And it was better for Dillian Whyte that he was shoved over by Tyson Fury rather than getting hit with a follow-up. Because if he'd been hit with a follow-up, he probably would have been out cold. But Dillian Whyte feels aggrieved. He feels like he should have had more time to recover. And he actually wants a rematch with Tyson Fury. I think that the people around Dillian who really care about him, forget about his training team because they're being paid. You can't rely on people like that to actually have the fighter's best interests at heart. I'm talking about his personal friends, Dean, etc., his family members. They need to be taking Dillian aside and saying, look, bro, you were done. Forget about the fact that Fury pushed you to the canvas. It's better that he pushed you than he punched you because you were in a seriously bad way. It actually reminds me a bit of Lennox Lewis when he lost to Oliver McCall, because Lewis and his team, Frank Maloney and all the other guys, were complaining that the referee stopped the fight prematurely against Oliver McCall. I mean, what brand of crack are you smoking? Did you see how gone Lennox Lewis was when he got off the canvas against McCall? The referee did absolutely the right thing. Now, McCall didn't shove Lewis to the canvas after landing the punch, but again, that's academic. In fact, I heard Spencer Fearon talk about the night that Dillian Whyte was knocked out by Anthony Joshua. And he said that he went to Dillian's dressing room after the fight, and Dillian was complaining about the referee stopping the fight too early against AJ. And he said that he told Dillian, you were gone, you know, bro. The referee did the right thing. You were in no position to continue. He was absolutely right to wave it off. And so with the Tyson Fury fight, similar situation, Dillian is trying to blame the referee. He's saying that Tyson Fury was calling for the referee to stop it because he didn't want Dillian to have a fair opportunity to recover. But that's not the case at all. Tyson Fury was calling for the referee to stop it because Dillian was completely gone. It was an act of compassion by Tyson Fury to call for the referee to stop it. When Dillian got up, he didn't know where he was. He lurched towards the ropes, and that's when the referee said, no, you're done. Dillian Whyte should be grateful to the referee. And I have to tip my hat to Tyson Fury's compassion in that situation. It kind of reminded me of Larry Holmes when he knocked out Marvis Frazier, who's the son of Joe Frazier. In that fight, Holmes landed a tremendous right hand in the first round, and Frazier was absolutely gone. He was done, but he got to his feet and it was allowed to continue. And Larry Holmes went in there and started hitting Marvis Frazier at will, and he was completely out of it. And Larry Holmes at one point motioned to the referee, come in and stop the fight. What are you doing? I don't even want to knock this kid out, because he knew Marvis Frazier growing up. He was friendly with him and his dad. Of course, he sparred Joe Frazier. He didn't want to lay this kid out cold. He wanted the referee to come in and stop it so it wouldn't get to that. And that's what I saw with Tyson Fury. He had compassion for Dillian Whyte. He didn't want to see him stretched out the way that he was against Povetkin because he was completely helpless when he got off the canvas. So again, I hope there are members of Dillian Whyte's family and his close friends who are going to tell him the truth. If you really care about somebody, that's what you're going to do, regardless of the consequences. Because Dillian Whyte's health is on the line here. By the sounds of it, Dillian Whyte has no intention of retiring. I think he should. I think the only fight for Dillian Whyte at this stage would be a trilogy fight with Chisora. But other than that, I think his punch resistance has deteriorated to such a degree that it's going to be dangerous for him to continue boxing. The Chisora fight may be worth the risk because Chisora's punch resistance has diminished as well. And because they're old rivals, because they're both well known in the UK, the fight could still generate a decent amount of money for the pair of them. Some retirement money. But aside from that fight, I don't really want to see Dillian Whyte continue, to be honest with you. That's my take on the situation. Give me your take in the comment section below.